Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler,
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
and this is the show where about 2.5 weeks ago we told you the Orioles were sort of okay. We weren't in love with the early play, but saw some room for improvement. And since that recording, our Baltimore Orioles have gone 10-2, guys. Are we starting to eat some crow? Jesse, you're smiling there.
Yeah, they heard us loud and clear. No, it's been wild to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's been a lot of fun. The Orioles are good, I guess. I think we asked that question a couple times last year. This year, maybe asking a little bit more often. But Eli, I don't know. Are the Orioles good? You think?
I think the Orioles are good. I think they're good, but I do not think they're as good as their record shows.
Oh.
I think that we have benefited from facing the Detroit Tigers an awful lot.
Well,
and I'm concerned that having only like 3 hitters hitting in our lineup at any given time is going to eventually start to be a not sustainable process.
Yeah, it doesn't sound ideal. Do you want me to? I'll go through the teams they've beaten or they've played since we last recorded, and then Jess, I know you had something to pop in there, but real quick because this kind of this plays into Eli's point there. The Orioles went 2-0 in DC. Then they swept the Tigers at home. Took 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox at home. Took 3 out of 4. This isn't in order. They took 3 out of 4 from the Athletics at home. And then just today, as we're recording, they finished up taking 3 out of 4 from those very same Tigers. So in this 10-2 run, they've won 6 times against the lowly Detroit Tigers. Jess, do you want to say something there?
Well, I was just kind of thinking, going 10-2 has allowed me to sort of emotionally move on from the Ryan McKenna era, so that's been nice. Kind of forgotten about that since, but
you brought it right back up. So I feel like you need a little more therapy on that point.
Okay. Well, okay, maybe. No, I felt like, of course, watching them play right now is really exciting. I think what we were all hoping for to see something like this break out. The Orioles had, what was it? How many games did they win in a row last year?
Oh, shoot.
I know, I should know. It wasn't like 14. I think it was like 10 or 11 or something.
Yeah,
but
I'll look it up. Go ahead.
Okay, gotcha. But in any case, so it's really nice. I mean, it's really exciting when a team gets really hot, and the Orioles are right now, despite the bad schedule that they've had. A lot of baseball at the end of the year turns out to be beating the teams you should beat, and most of the time we're sweeping them, or a lot of the time we're sweeping them. So right now I'm feeling really, really positive. So. Yeah.
Well, and what I will say about the week schedule, because you're right. I mean, it's a little bit, it hasn't been totally fair of like the complexion of the entire league what the Orioles have faced this year. It's been like the Tigers, a lot of the AL Central, which is the White Sox, who, I think coming into the year, people kind of viewed as sort of a mediocre team, and they look much worse than that this year. The Orioles beat them in a series. But at the same time, this is also kind of the result of what is supposed to be a more even schedule versus what we as Orioles fans are used to. I mean, the AL East is tough in general. And if you're a fan of like the Yankees or the Red Sox, you're used to playing those teams, or you're used to playing, if you're the Yankees fan, you play the Red Sox a bunch and they're typically pretty good. You play the Rays a bunch, they're typically pretty good. And the Orioles are this easy team you tend to have on your schedule. As Oriole fans, we don't really have those easy games historically because we're playing the Yankees, Red Sox, Blue Jays, who are good right now, and the Rays. We're playing all of those teams less now. That means we're going to get more of these games against the AL Central, which is, objectively the worst division in baseball. And maybe the Orioles aren't 19-9 good as they are right now as we record, but they maybe are closer to that than has been reflected in their record in previous years. You know what I mean? Early rebuild years, the Orioles were obviously terrible, but even last year, if they play the Red Sox or the Yankees less or the Rays less, maybe they win 3, 4, 5 more games, and they're a playoff team a year ago. You know what I mean? So I think there's some, I don't know, it's uneven on both accounts, if that makes any sense.
Well, this schedule change, I mean, came at the perfect time for the
Yeah.
Orioles, right? Because, I mean, this AL East is, I mean, we were talking about it before the podcast, is just ridiculous right now. And granted, when we were kids, there were definitely years where it was ridiculous. But the Red Sox may be a weak link in the division, but other than that, they are really, really, every team in this division is very, very talented.
The
Yeah.
Yankees
Go
are
ahead,
actually
Rob.
last in the division right now, which makes me very happy to say.
But that's true, but I
No,
still think
no.
the Red Sox are the weak link in the division. But I hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think the Yankees are the worst team. They're not the worst team, but they
Right.
are the last place team.
And
And we
growing
should
up,
just take the time to say
right, you're right. How often growing up did we see the Yankees in last place? Correct.
exactly.
Go ahead, Tyler. Sorry.
Well, what I'll say about the Yankees, though, I think if over like their last 100 games, the Yankees aren't very good. Like going back to last year, they're not very good. Judge was obviously great last year, but when Aaron Judge isn't having, we got to see what the Yankees look like when Aaron Judge isn't having a historic MVP season, which he's not
Right.
going to do this year what he did last year. He's still really good this year. But the Yankees, they're a team that's buoyed a little bit more by one really good player than I think we tend to think of them. Now they're also going to get Carlos Rodon back later this year, big free agent signing who hasn't even pitched for him yet.
That's
That's gonna make
unfortunate.
that's
Yeah.
gonna make things
Right.
tougher. But yeah, I mean the Yankees are, they'll be there for sure. But yeah, the division is just ridiculous. But I think also kind of related to this, when we last talked about when we wrapped up the previous podcast episode, we said that all these games coming up, it sounded like the Orioles could win a whole bunch of them. And you only do that if you are a pretty good team. You have to be a good team to win 10 out of 12 games. I mean, that doesn't happen to mediocre teams or even bad teams. So you have to win the games that are in front of you. I remind you of, I think, the 2021 Tampa Bay Rays, who lost to the Orioles one time and won like 102 games or something that year and won the division by like 8 games or whatever. You got to beat up on the little guys because that, at the end of the day, those games matter just as much as the other games. So you got to
Right.
play who's in front of you. The Orioles did that, and right after we record, they're going to have 3 more games against a really bad team, the Royals. So they should win even more games. So I don't know. Maybe they're not on pace for, or they're not really like a 108 win team or whatever they're on pace for. But I don't know. Maybe they're better than we all were giving them credit for coming into the year, which I think was just about stasis, like repeating what they did last year. So maybe they're a little bit better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little yeah, I mean, I don't want to get overconfident. And I am urging caution to all the listeners, right? But with
Yeah.
that said, I mean, there are some it's kind of what I said. I think I said this a episode or two ago. I think a lot of the season is dependent on a lot of our players performing sort of at levels that we haven't previously experienced. So our team is not a team that has a bunch of guys that we're going to rely on their track record, for instance, right? We have a couple of them, right? But overall, our season is going to come down to, right, like this rotation. How good is Bradish going to be this year? How good is Rodriguez and Kramer going to be this year? Right. And then you look at the offense, you look at Henderson, you look at Adley, you look at Mateo now, right? So, I mean, I think the season is dependent upon sort of people putting together seasons that we haven't seen them put together before.
Sure. Well, and I think that's why the Orioles lagged a little bit in some preseason projections. And I think like Bakota over on Baseball Reference still has the Orioles as like a sub 500 team projected out, or maybe like just above. And that's because, projection systems have to take into account some players that don't have long track records. And the Orioles are a team with a number of players not there. So I think that's a fair statement, Jesse. And those types of players are also susceptible to like small sample size overperformance or underperformance, and we might be seeing some of that right now. So that's a good point. Anything else we want to kind of touch on with the early success of the Orioles? Eli, anything maybe going better or worse, or what do you want to point out here?
Yeah, I know we talked about it last time. The pitching is still worse for me. I'm still disappointed in our rotation. And we'll get into Dean Kramer specifically, but I think it should be said Kyle Bradish has struggled a little bit. Tyler Wells has been a huge boon. He's been really phenomenal. It's been great to see him. Grayson looks like he's starting to find his footing, but then again, like we've talked about, that was against the Tigers, and that is literally the worst offense in the league. So yeah. I don't know. I am scared about starting to play some tougher lineups. It's like when you go in and you face a 1-2-3, from the Blue Jays, that's like George Springer and then Bo Bichette and then Vlad Guerrero. Like, I'm not confident in running Dean Kramer out there right now. And Kramer, was phenomenal last year, but he's got all kinds of problems this year. So don't want to get too much into it, of course, but I think there are cracks in our armor, and I am scared to see them exploited.
I don't know. I mean, I was pretty impressed by the Zach McKinstry led Detroit Tigers this past week. A guy I had very little familiarity with, but the point is well taken. I think they had that guy Nick Maton hit cleanup a couple times with like a 150 batting average, which batting average isn't everything, but I feel like every time I saw him come up, he struck out. But yeah, I mean, what I will say, the starting pitching has definitely been worse. I think worse than even like some of our low expectations for aspects of it, because like you said, we thought Kramer would be better. We thought Bradish would be better. As far as what's gone better than expected, though, I think on the offensive side of things is that the Orioles are walking a ton still, and they're not really striking out. Now, they're not really hitting a ton of home runs either right now. I feel like that's kind of dried up a little bit, but just the approach at the plate is like foreign to me as an Orioles fan of, 30 years. I think we've talked about this, but the Showalter era was, go all out for home runs and just hope it works out. And this team just walks at a ridiculous rate. Like everybody walks except Ryan Mountcastle, pretty much. Like the whole lineup walks.
The thing that is so amazing, I think Gunner's like the perfect example of that. He's literally hitting 200 flat, but he walks so often that his OPS is still like 97 or OPS plus. I'm sorry. So he's like a league average hitter, despite having like a 392 slugging. I was just looking at it, low slugging, low batting average, but he's just walking and putting himself on base all the time.
Yeah, and that can kind of save your offense sometimes when the ball's not leaving the ballpark, because then you can manufacture runs, and that's kind of what the Orioles do on occasion, where they can cobble together 4 or 5 runs and get a win. And again, it's coming against some bad teams, but that's just a new dynamic. So that's something that I think I feel is going to maintain, just because the whole mantra of the organization in the last year or two especially has been the swing decision stuff and like plate discipline and strike zone awareness and all that. And all these guys coming up, I think, are going to kind of have that hammered into their head, or else they weren't going to be drafted by the Orioles. So I feel pretty good about that. And I have some hope that the pitching is going to bounce back. At least, John Means will be back at some point. They're going to make a trade. They have to make a trade. And those could be 2 big pieces right there that totally transform a rotation. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on the pitching for now. Anything to add before we jump to the next topic here, boys? No?
Do it.
All right, let's talk about somebody who is, we're intimately familiar with, who made his debut with the Baltimore Orioles this week. Joey Ortiz has been a shortstop in the organization for a couple of years now, former draft pick out of New Mexico State. Or was it New Mexico or New Mexico State?
Yep, New Mexico State.
Okay. Got called up this past weekend for the series against the Tigers, made a couple of starts, went 2 for 8 with a strikeout, a run, and 4 RBI, which was pretty huge. However, as of this recording, he has already been sent back down to AAA. Stowers has been recalled. Eli, maybe I'll go to you first, because you're the one that, of the 3 of us, because I don't know him at all, but the 3 of us that knows Joey the best, just what are your thoughts on the call up and how he performed this weekend?
Yeah, I guess I'll give the little bit of context here. So I played on a summer league team in the Cal Ripken Collegiate Baseball League. And my parents actually, while I was playing on it, were host parents and involved with the team and such. So Joey spent a couple of weeks living with us. And then, I ended up playing 45 games with him over the span of 2 months. So saw plenty of him. I made a joke on Twitter, but I was like, it was nice pitching in front of him because I had no hope of striking anybody out. And so I needed a good shortstop behind me. But yeah, it was super cool to see. And, he comes up and has 3 RBIs in his first game, turned a couple double plays throughout the weekend, and just, did what you can hope for. 2 for 8. That's a 250 batting average. That's league average, and a couple of ribbies. It's just, it was just cool. It's nice to see, some personnel movement with the Orioles, and we continue to have this excitement, all the excitement that we had with Adley coming up, with Gunnar coming up, with Grayson coming up, understanding that this pipeline is still so full of legitimate big league talent, and continuing to get to see that blossom at the major league level. There's nothing better.
Yeah, also worth noting, he also lied to Eric Haas about being out at second base.
I saw, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think he meant to lie to him, but he did.
I don't know.
Cool.
I was thinking about texting him about that.
It's fascinating, but I gotta say, Haas cannot. I mean, you cannot trust an opposing player on something like that. You got to go to the umpire directly, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So it definitely seemed like he lied to him, but I don't know.
Anything to get the out, man. Anything to get the out. That's his defensive, his intuition just coming through, being like, he beat me to the bag, so I got to get him out a different way. But yeah, I mean, you can go on Joey's baseball reference and you go to his minor league stats, and his stint with the Baltimore Dodgers is on there, so you can go see how he played.
Yeah, I am actually on baseball reference because of that. None of the stats are impressive, but I'm there.
That's cool. I mean, hey, you are the one of the 3 of us that is on baseball reference. That is worth bragging about. So I like that.
Just a quick note though, Eli. I'm pretty confident he did play a lot of second base for the Dodgers when he played with you too, though. So
yeah, he did. Yeah, he played both.
You just commented on his shortstop, so I was just
he played more shortstop, but we usually had him at short, Austin at third. So
there you go.
I don't need you to tell me about my team.
He's
okay.
Look, Jesse's just trying to let you. He's got familiarity with the dirt in the Baltimore area on both sides of the bag. So when he does eventually play at Camden Yards, he'll be ready to go.
Exactly.
That's what Jesse was.
Be making my debut at 37. So.
Jess, but how about you? What are your thoughts on maybe not how his weekend went, because Eli kind of covered that, but what do you think about him being sent right back down in favor of Stowers? Are you comfortable with that, or what do you think?
Well, that's the thing that I gotta say is sort of unfortunate about us doing this segment is, our excitement is dampened by, he's already back down. So, I mean, it's okay. I mean, Stowers obviously has a place on the team too. So, I mean, I before the season, I thought it was going to be tougher for Joey to be on the major league team, since we signed Frazier. So I thought his road was a little more difficult and his path to the majors was a little more difficult. So it's not surprising to me that there's going to be some sort of shuffling around, throughout the course of the year, even though, because of the CBO or the CBA, there is a limitation on how much the Orioles will be able to just shuffle and send guys up and down and stuff like that. But overall, the Orioles are going to try to do that to the maximum. So I wouldn't be surprised if guys sort of in Joey's situation, Stowers, et cetera, they do kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, and they're using. It seems like the Orioles are going to use the 40-man roster to its absolute maximum ability. It seems like what they did with Stowers and Ortiz was kind of a platoon sort of thing where there was left-handed starters, so they brought Joey up to face them and put Frazier on the bench. And now they're going to face more righties today, and then through the Royals series, they're going to have Stowers play, and Joey's going back down. The Orioles are the team I'm the most intimately familiar with. I don't know how many teams do that with prospect types where they kind of shuffle them around based on like the starting pitchers coming up that week. That seems kind of like odd to me, but they said the same thing when Stowers got sent down, was we're facing a bunch of lefties with Oakland, so he's going to go down and get everyday playing time. Just very odd.
I do have real sort of objections to that sort of philosophy. That doesn't make sense to me.
Because I actually kind of like it. What's the objection?
Well, the objection is there's no sort of consistency, right? I mean, you want these young guys to sort of know their play. Well, not know their place, but know their role and sort of have some sort of stability as they're trying to grow and develop as players. And I think it's negative that they lack that sort of stability.
I don't know, kind of the way that I'm seeing it is like I think it's sort of an acknowledgement from the Orioles. Joey, like, he had the long-term injury, came back, struggled a little bit, and then tore it up at the end of last year, comes out tearing it up again. I think it's a little bit of an acknowledgement that these guys are getting to the point where there's less and less for them to learn at AAA. And so, like, if you want to keep pushing a top prospect forward, right, and you want to continue sustained growth for them, like, it doesn't help anyone to have Joey Joey, Westberg, Norby just sitting there, and just playing every day in AAA where they have been playing, and Westberg's got a 950 OPS.
So then find a way to make them major leaguers or trade them or something.
Well, but I mean, that's just it. Is like I think they are letting the situation develop, and while they are in this waiting period, evaluating. Like I don't think the Orioles make a move. People don't usually make big trades in the first month of the season, right? So it's going to be probably at least another month until we see some kind of trade move. And so in the meantime, the way that you can showcase these players, right? Joey can come up, show that he can handle being a middle infielder in the major leagues, like driving a couple runs in clutch situations. And then you can bring Kyle Stowers back up, and Kyle Stowers can go ahead and, like poke a ball over the shortstop like he did today. It's like,
well, I disagree with the showcase part. I mean, especially with Joey. I mean, someone like Stowers, right, the Orioles have sort of been showcasing him in a sense. I mean,
why not Joey?
Well, 2 for 8 with, I mean, that's not a showcase. I mean, his value didn't jump up because he went 2 for 8.
Okay, yeah, I mean, but like he's being put in front of more major league teams, coaches, scouts. He's just out there. I mean, like, I don't think the intent was to showcase necessarily. But I think it's like an added benefit that you can show this guy has had major league time and has handled himself just fine.
I do also think what the Orioles are trying to do right now is stagger the young guys to get experience at like varying levels, if that makes sense. I don't think you can't promote Ortiz, Stowers, Westberg, everybody like all at the same time and have everybody with like a year or two of experience on the roster, which, like, if you talk about like who has the absolute most talent at every position, a lot of the answers there would be like guys that are at AAA or guys that have been in the big leagues for less time than whatever. But so I think the Orioles are attempting to like get these guys up at different intervals and get them levels of experience at different paces to at some point. I think there's some sort of like mad scientist reasoning that it's all going to click at some point. But yeah, they seem apprehensive to promote these young guys for the long haul unless you're like the absolute creme de la creme type of player. They're not even doing it with DL Hall, who was a first rounder who's obviously had his issues, but they're not doing it there.
Only Henderson and Adley, basically.
Pretty much only Henderson and Adley. So like, unless you are like the guys, you're not coming up as a fixture. And even less so for Ortiz, because I don't know if they expected this breakout from Mateo this year, but the fact that it's happened, Mateo's playing every single day. He's got to, and he's got to be the shortstop every single day. And then Gunner's going to play most days, and he's probably going to be at third base or DH, or he's going to be at third base a lot of the time. That that takes away even more opportunities for Ortiz, who could probably play some third base at the big league level. I just think it's a combination of the season is turning out a little bit different than I think maybe the Orioles thought, with the emergence of Mateo and the fact that there's so many young guys. They're not all going to get up. I think like Kowser, when he comes up, he'll be up, like, and he's up forever. But they're gonna jostle these guys back and forth. And it's weird because it's with position players, but I think like with a pitcher, although Hall is not the best example, you could see a guy come up and just be like a bullpen guy. They like the Orioles did it with Gossman years ago. He was a bullpen guy for like that first season or like the second half of that first season, and then was in the rotation. It's tougher to do that with a bench guy because with a position player, because you don't really know when he's going to get in the game. So you kind of, if you're going to do that sort of a thing where you just give him a taste, you kind of have to promote him and demote him. But as you said, Jesse, it's not, you can't just do it once a week because the CBA doesn't allow it. So I guess they're trying to like toe that line and figure out the balance, and this is kind of what it looks like.
I mean, to me, it's like, I think they're trying to find opportunities for advancement for these guys while simultaneously having the roster constraints that we do, and like the roster constraints of having 17 middle infielders on the team is not going to go away until, we like get into the season a little bit. There is some data on some potential trade, prospects and such. Not to say we're trading for prospects, but prospective trade pieces. And so I think this is an opportunity to, continue the advancement of these guys, and under the umbrella of the team as a whole cannot have, like you said, Tyler, seven second base, shortstop prospects and 3 major leaguers.
Yeah. Right. And your point about Mateo, I think, is a good one, because I think it was sort of, I mean, we certainly bought into it sort of in the offseason. It was somewhat conventional wisdom that Mateo would be traded at the deadline to make room for some of these other guys. But I mean, he's been so good, of course, that it's probably he's leapfrogged them and he's going to be the shortstop. I mean, if he somewhat continues, what he's doing. Obviously not exactly this is even required, but he's probably leapfrogged Westberg and Joey, of course, for shortstop. So at this point, like one of the prospects are at this point are more likely to get traded, and he's probably going to stay around. So
yeah,
and the Orioles probably weren't expecting that this offseason.
Yeah. And so it works out that they didn't trade from that shortstop surplus, at least not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. All right, well, let's move on. Speaking of a guy that's kind of leapfrogged people, Yennier Cano, out of nowhere. This is a guy that came from the Minnesota Twins last year in the Jorge Lopez deal, kind of as like a throw-in piece. Like he went on the 40-man, but he was already 28, 29 years old. Had kind of struggled in his big league career, the little bit of time he had with the Twins. Struggled with the Orioles late in the season. Now he comes up and he is suddenly like an 8th inning guy, a 9th inning guy for the Orioles, like right away. And he's like thriving in the role. He's made 9 appearances, thrown 11 innings, is yet to allow a hit, is yet to walk anyone. I think he's let one person on by hitting them. Right.
The only base runner he's allowed in I guess he faced 4 more last night. So I think it's like 33 hitters or something like that.
So he nearly threw a perfect game over.
Right. He threw a no-hitter.
Yeah.
People were saying that online. He threw a no-hitter.
Yeah. I mean, he is suddenly the Orioles' best reliever. He got a save today, a second one. The Orioles are trying to, it seems like, give Felix Bautista a day off more often. But Eli, I don't know. Do you want to tell us about like Yennier Cano and how he's doing this?
Yeah, I mean, he's just first off, he's awesome. That's like my primary only point right here. The second thing, the average launch angle against him is negative 7.9 degrees. It's like people can't even hit it straight. It's everything that is made contact with just goes immediately into the ground. It's hilarious. But I think like what is so devastating about him, so he's got, he's got a slider as well, and it's not a bad pitch by any means. But he's got his sinker that's riding more than 95 miles an hour, and it's got 19 inches of movement, and he's got a changeup that also induces 19 inches of movement on almost the exact same axis at 5 miles an hour slower. So, these pitches play so well together. They're the perfect example of what people talk about when they say tunneling. And, these two pitches come out of the hand. They look exactly the same. Each one is gross in its own right, but pairing them together, he's just been making people look silly. He throws in the changeup, they go down to a knee, and he hits the Aroldis Chapman stare, as he said. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. He's been like phenomenal.
He absolutely brings like the closer type of attitude to the mound, that
the flair, right?
We all love Felix, but Felix is not that guy. He's not that guy. He's got the big arm, but he seems like a nice guy you could talk to in a pleasant
He seems very
conversation.
gentle.
Yeah,
very
his
gentle.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
His celebration is giving 2 thumbs up.
Yes.
It's like
right. Exactly. So it's crazy that this guy Cano has come out of nowhere to suddenly be, I won't say he's usurped Felix as the top relief pitcher, but it feels like he's number 2 right now. I don't know, Jess, do you have any initial thoughts on Yennier Cano?
Well, I will say I think he is serving a critical function for the Orioles in the bullpen right now, especially with the injury of Dylan Tate. It's really and with the struggles recently of CNL Perez, it's been really important for the Orioles to sort of have this 8th inning / closer arm back there. So that's been really good. I think this very much feels like a manifestation of the Orioles somewhat replicating the Rays model. I mean, you always talk about, Tyler, on this podcast, how the Orioles are turning into this organization that can just produce pitching talent, right? And I mean, Cano had no... Right, like you had said, he was a throw-in in the Jorge Lopez trade. I mean, there were no organizations really around Major League Baseball that were really highly valuing this guy. How at least in the way that he is performing right now. So the fact that the Orioles were sort of able to take this pitcher and make him into some sort of really high level talent, at least for right now, in the back of the bullpen. I mean, it's been great, and I think it is a reflection of the Orioles being able to sort of cultivate this and get the best out of the pitchers that the organization is given. So
yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like the type of thing where they saw some traits in him, clearly wasn't perfect, had some struggles even with the Orioles, so they didn't even fix stuff right away, but something has clicked, and as is often the case with relievers, you kind of just got to ride the wave and see how long it takes you for, because it could come crashing down. There's no evidence to suggest this guy is a dude for the next decade, but for right now, you got to keep riding it. What you said about the need for him in this moment, Jesse, I think is important, because the Orioles have been a little thin given some situations, but Michael Givens and Dylan Tate, I believe, are rehabbing right now, I know Tate's already rehabbing. Givens, I think, is going to start rehabbing here soon. You would imagine both of them come back and go right back into the bullpen. So I don't know. Do we have any thoughts in terms of like what's going to happen there? I mean, because what I'll say about Cano is, if you just look at him from afar and the way he throws, it looks kind of like Michael Givens to me.
Oh, so yeah, absolutely.
Do you have two of those guys in the same bullpen? I don't know. I guess you do. But
that's actually super interesting. What's interesting about it, and Granted, I haven't seen Givens in a little while. Like I wasn't gonna turn on the Cubs last year, but the the interesting thing about it is I do think that the repertoires are pretty different. Givens largely threw a four-seam fastball and worked with the slider, whereas Cano is purely like arm side movement and sink and change and just kind of mixing in the slider. So despite the very, very similar arm slots, they do kind of employ them differently. I think which helps. It's still true that it's nice to mix and match arm angles. I remember there was I think in 2021 there was somebody stitched together all of the bullpen arm slots from the Rays, and it just made like a perfect semicircle. I mean, they had filled in the entire thing. So it's definitely something that is looked at. And that's an interesting point, Tyler. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know Cano is much bigger than Givens. Cano's a big dude.
Yeah.
And Givens is, I think Givens could fade into a crowd because he doesn't look like a professional athlete, I think, initially, whereas Cano looks like a basketball player. But
I think also it may be less of a question than actually needs to be addressed. I mean, I think there are a lot of questions about this Givens injury and how effective and how good he will be if and when he returns. So it might not even be a question the Orioles even really have to think about. Can we afford to have two? So,
well, that's true. And as we just said, the volatility of relievers, everybody's good right now, or the makeup is logical right now, but that could change in a week's time, 2 weeks' time. So who knows? But it does feel like some tough decision is going to have to get made. Cino Perez is out of options. Danny Coulombe's been great, so I wouldn't even worry about that. Keegan Aiken is suddenly kind of bad after his paternity leave.
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing to me. Keegan Aiken can still be optioned.
Yeah.
And so to me, I agree. I think that Cino Perez has been worse, but I think that you have 97 with a power slider from the left side, and that's going to get picked up on waivers somewhere, especially because of how good he was last year.
Right.
Yeah. So to me, that says you can't really do that.
I mean, he had a sub-2 ERA last year. I mean, he was incredible.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Right? I think it was sub-2, right?
I don't think it was.
It was. I know Perez had the best ERA in the bullpen, even though he didn't pitch as the best. Yeah, he had a 1.40 ERA.
Oh, damn. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, and I will say about Aiken, because Coulombe's been so good, you don't really need the third lefty. So yeah, but that's one spot. Then it becomes the second spot that I guess it's between Voth, who has no options, or Ballman, who does have an option.
I think
Ballman was the other guy I was looking at. Yeah,
but Ballman has been really good,
except his last outing.
Okay,
but yeah,
one outing, but Voth has been pretty bad all year.
Yeah. Yeah, Voth was okay today.
Voth was good last year, though. Ballman was not good last year.
Yeah, well, Ballman was in AAA most of the year,
right?
And still developing to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to do. Even if it's Ballman or Voth, they kind of fill similar voids in that they're like multi-inning guys.
Right.
And Aiken is the same. So you're bringing back 2 one-inning guys, although I know Tate can go – both Givens and Tate can go more than one. But I think
they're basically one-inning guys. Yeah.
So that is a little bit tough. But it'd be optioning both of them, so it's not like they're gone forever. So that probably is the easy way to go. So
the way the Orioles will go.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about a pitcher who's not pitching so well. Dean Kramer. His season so far, in 29 2/3, he's got a 6.67 ERA, 158 WHIP, and he's allowed 38 hits, 9 walks. Eli, you said before, you were texting us saying you were ready to rip him apart. Would you like to proceed to do that?
Well, I should say I like Dean Kramer, and the reason I was eager to dive into this is because Jesse and I, as the resident Israeli baseball fans, are super, super invested in the well-being and health of Dean Kramer. So
We love D. Kramer on this podcast.
Right. So, I had to like really get into what's going on with him because I care for him so much.
Tough love.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a small part of like the Jewish ethos that is, giving open and honest feedback regardless of how it makes the other person feel. So we it's what we're here to do. All right, so like at face value, Dean Kramer's arsenal looks even better than it was last year. So he's throwing every pitch but his sinker harder, and the sinker is just about as hard. It's 0.1 miles an hour slower, and that's just kind of in the noise of the data.
Negligible.
Right. Every pitch he threw last year has as much or more movement this year. And he added a new pitch in the sweeper that he's throwing. So it's like at face value, the arsenal should be playing up better than it did last year. And so then, you kind of start looking at the pitch locations. You're like, okay, what's going on here? So like at face value, he's attacking people a little bit less. First pitch strikes are down 8%. He's throwing fewer pitches on the edge of the plate. And I think kind of consequently, hitters are chasing less and less frequently, and they're chasing like 7% less. So his ability to induce a swing on a pitch that's outside the zone was part of what kind of set him apart last year. And he has really like lost that ability, I think, because he has had such a harder time finding the edges of the plate. And that's like particularly noticeable with his cutter, which has been destroyed this year. Hitters are slugging .905 against it. And so you can kind of see this. Baseball Savant has this really nice metric. They call them like swing take runs. And you can kind of value swing and take decisions against a pitcher or for a hitter in terms of runs. So last year, Dean Kramer in the heart of the plate was at minus 10 runs. Shadow, which is like kind of outer third, inner third, etc., negative 13 runs. He still didn't get many people to chase, so that was a like plus 7 runs. And waste pitches, he also didn't do much. But this year, in the heart of the plate, he's getting destroyed. It's 5 runs, and this is a stat that does accumulate, so the numbers will get bigger and bigger as the year goes on. And like the chases and the waste pitches are still positive as well. So that's all to say he is living in the middle of the plate. People are punishing him there. When he tries to go off and tries to get people to chase, he's not able to make it convincing enough. And people are able to lay off everything that he puts outside the zone. So I think, there's a certain element of he's probably working with this like retooled and kind of upgraded repertoire, but it's just a little bit too early in the year for him to have fully figured it out. And like the sweeper and cutter in particular are finding the inner third to a lefty all the time. And that was a pitch that he was really able to get in on the hands of people last year. His cutter was one of his most effective pitches his most effective pitch by run value last year. And it seems like he is totally unable to get that to his glove side. And that might like speak to something mechanical as well. I admittedly have not like watched a video of him or anything like that, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, all in all, retooled repertoire, everything like from a pitch metric standpoint looks like it should be really good. He just is not spotting up. He's finding the middle of the plate. He's unable to put people away. And he's really, really being punished for it.
Yeah. You want to go, Jess?
I was just going to say, I mean, it's been interesting to watch because he's not getting, I think it would have been within the realm of reasonable expectations that Dean Kramer would have stretches this year where he would struggle, right? What's a little surprising, kind of like Eli was talking about, is the way in which he is struggling. And he's not walking a lot of guys like we would expect him. If he was struggling, my first thing would go to command, right? So obviously Eli was identifying that he's had command issues. The first pitch strikes, and command within the strike zone clearly is not there. But with that said, he's getting hit around a lot. And that's been really the big problem. So that's kind of a different issue than I would sort of normally expect. But like Eli was saying, with the new set and new arrangement of pitches, there is going to be an adjustment period for that. So yeah. So it's a little yeah, I guess I've been surprised by how much he's been hit. I guess that's my big takeaway from all of this, because I mean, he's given up almost like 10 more hits than innings pitched, right? And his whip is just through the roof. It's like 150. So not good.
Yeah, I back to what Eli was saying about the cutter against lefties. Lefties are torching Kramer. Righties are not really hitting him that well. Lefties have a 390 batting average, 429 OBP, and a 627 slugging. So I think, like, if you want to boil it down to maybe like a pitch against one type of batter, cutters against lefties definitely seems to be the issue. Something else I wanted to like say was that it's also possible Dean Kramer wasn't quite as good last year as we felt like he was. And he's not as bad this year as he currently is pitching. And the true Dean Kramer could be somewhere kind of in the middle.
I feel like you're trying to say this very carefully, Tyler.
Well, the reason I'm saying it is that, so if you look at his numbers last year, 3.23 ERA, his expected ERA was 4.49, and his expected fielding independent pitching was 4.43. This year's ERA is 6.67, bad, and his expected ERA is bad, 6.94, but his expected fielding independent pitching is 4.82. So if you kind of view that as an ERA, 4.82, that's not that different from an expected ERA of 4.49 last year. And the other numbers that jump off the page at me as to why the ERA is inflated is his home run rate is just like way higher right now. He's giving up his home run per fly ball rate is 18.4%, which is astronomical. Yeah. Last year was 7.3%, which is really pretty good. So yeah, people are just leaving the ballpark on him a little more often. And then I do think he's getting hit hard, which is part of this problem, but also he's a little unlucky. His batting average on balls in play is 348. So I think what we're seeing with Dean right now is he's not pitching well, clearly, and he's clearly struggling against lefties, but I think he's being a little bit unlucky. And I don't think that anything with him is necessarily broken, but there should be some like positive regression coming for him. So I'm not so sure. I don't feel great about my preseason Cy Young pick, or like Orioles Cy Young. I'm not insane. It was an Orioles specific Cy Young award. I don't feel great about that, but I do think he'll get back to being like a sub-5 ERA type of guy. Like you said, Eli, a lot of things about him should make for a better pitcher this year. And I think that those things will eventually shine through. It's a little upsetting that he hasn't pitched well against the bad teams we've talked about so far.
He had like one good start against the Nationals, and that was it. Right. And all his numbers includes like 7 innings of like scorelessness or whatever it was against the Nationals.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, there's some stuff there, but I think there's enough there to like. And also there's nobody right now pushing him, I don't think, for a spot in the Orioles rotation. Like the other options are Spencer Watkins, Bruce Zimmerman. Like Zimmerman's been good in Norfolk right now, but we know what he is in the majors.
Yeah.
I mean, you could give DL
Dean
Hall
Kramer
a spot start. Yeah. So
take Kramer any day over Bruce Zimmerman.
Right. So I think you're going to let Kramer figure it out right now. I'm not immediately worried. But yeah, it's not great. That's why, I start to think about the rotation because, I said earlier, Means will be back eventually. I feel like they've got to make a trade. So then it's like, okay, well, that's 2 guys. Whose spots are they taking? And right now I feel like it's Kramer and Bradish, which is weird, but I think those are the spots that are the most vulnerable right now.
Right.
Hopefully that changes, but that feels like the current situation. I don't know
I
if
would
you guys
like
have thoughts.
I would love if Gibson was the one that was vulnerable,
Well,
but yeah,
I think he'd have to really fall apart for that to happen.
right. I
But
mean, and
it's possible.
I mean, we more likely is he'd get traded than, you know,
Yeah.
he gets just
Yeah.
I
All
mean,
right.
Gibson's been better than both of them so far, though, and
Oh yeah.
that should be acknowledged.
oh
Oh,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, but in terms of like, I don't know, thinking about long term and stuff like that, I would
Yeah.
definitely much prefer Kramer or Bradish to have success for the Orioles this year than I would Kyle Gibson to be good for us.
Yeah,
this
but
year.
if you can trade for someone, you get John Means back, and then you have, the two you traded for, you have Means, you have Grayson Rodriguez, and then did I say Grayson? What am I saying?
I don't know. What are you
Okay. John Means, Grayson Rodriguez, the person we traded for, a free agent, and then just one more,
right?
like Tyler Wells.
Tyler Wells, yeah.
I mean, that's a great rotation,
Well,
and
yeah. And I
so my
don't
point
think,
is,
yeah, go ahead.
in a future world, you can exist without Dean Kramer and Kyle Bradish. Not that I want to necessarily. I'm
Right.
just,
Yeah.
it's feasible.
Yeah, I mean, signing a free agent to a 1-year deal like every year is a repeatable process. Like I think a lot of good teams sign a fifth starter for $8 million, $10 million most off seasons.
For sure.
All right. Moving on from Dean to our final topic here, Jorge Mateo, which we've kind of talked about him a little bit so far. Jesse, I think you had put down Mateo as sort of a topic you wanted to touch on here to wrap up the episode. I think the big thing with Mateo this year is just how different he's been offensively. I don't know if you had anything specific you really wanted to kind of touch on there as far as what the 2023 version of Jorge Mateo, how he differs from previous versions.
Well, I mean, Eli, I think talked about this a little while ago, on a previous podcast or something. But the glaring and obvious thing is just the swing decisions, the approach at the plate. There's such a contrast, and it's really reflected in. I mean, right now, I mean, he would be the in the MVP conversation if the season ended today. I mean, his numbers are just through the roof right now. I guess the discussion I'm sort of interested in is he just hot right now, or is this a different hitter than we had last year? And I'm tempted to say that not that these numbers necessarily will continue, but I do think I definitely more err on this is a different hitter than we saw last year. I don't think there was any stretch for any 2-week period last year or 1-week period last year where Mateo had these numbers, right? So there wasn't a situation last year where he got really hot and put this sort of collection of stats together. So I definitely do kind of feel like he has sort of made some connections and really figured it out hitting wise in the majors. And yeah, I'm really, really excited about to watch him the rest of the year. Defense, of course, the defense goes without saying, but I even mean at the plate and offensively too. I mean, and let alone on the base pass as always. So yeah, I mean, last year I remember we were having a conversation. I mean, I remember Palmer one time, and this is kind of how I always thought about it. He was so good defensively that Palmer was talking about, we just got to get this guy to hit 240 at the plate, right? and this is a great shortstop, and we're excited, and have him hit 15 home runs. He didn't say this part, but 240, 15, 20 home runs, something like that. I mean, but he's been incredible so far, and I think he definitely could be a plus offensive shortstop in the league. And I think we're seeing him really about to break out this season. So
yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you that he seems like a different player. I was trying to look because when he first came over to the Orioles last year, or not last year, 2021 from the Padres, he was kind of like on fire at the plate.
Yeah.
So I went and looked at that stretch from August 6th to 29th of 2021. Batted 353, but had just one home run. His OBP was only 380, which is good, but with a 353 batting average, not great. He only walked twice in that stretch.
Yeah, it's actually a really bad OBP for having a batting average that high, right? Yeah,
right. So that was when I think he was hitting like his absolute best with the Orioles prior to right now. And then over on Baseball Savant, like a number. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of red that's really intriguing, but the number that kind of like jumps off the page to me is his launch angle right now is only 5.7. So whereas previously it was 14.8 last year, 14.1 the year before, and then 28.5 in a really small sample size the year before. But that to me sounds like he's not really trying to hit home runs as much as he's trying to put the bat on the ball, put it in play, and it's very much like the Willie Mays Hayes from Major League type of situation. Like, stop hitting the ball in the top of the batting cage, put it in play, and use your legs. And I mean, for him, it's turning into home runs. So that's
right.
great.
Now he's hitting more home runs. Right. Yeah.
Right. But it's allowing him also to be more disciplined because he's striking out way less, walking a little bit more. I mean, yeah, feels like a different player to me. I don't know, Eli, what do you think?
Yeah, I fully agree. I'll like spare the listeners from just repeating everything you guys said, but definitely the swing decisions are different. The one thing I did want to focus on, Tyler, you mentioned that Dean Kramer's 18.3 or 18% home run per fly ball rate was insanely high. To kind of echo the launch angle sentiment on how he's not really hitting the ball in the air, but when he is, he's doing it with authority. Jorge Mateo's home run per fly ball rate is 27.3. And this was a little while ago. It's from a Fangraphs article I'm looking at. But, so the point is that it is true. He is more like line drive oriented. And honestly, a 5-degree launch angle is pretty low. His ground ball rate is pretty high. But, like through and through, you are seeing him lay off of pitches. This Fangraphs article mentioned that last year he was seeing 22% of his pitches up in the count. This year he's seeing over a third. So a 10% increase in the pitches he's seeing. He's now ahead in the count. He is doing damage on pitches that are, in his hot zones. I agree, and the strikeout rate has gone from, I just had it up. It was 27.6% last year to 15.2% this year so far. The walk rate has gone up 2.5%. He definitely, these are like we had the discussion with Gunnar about like building a foundation for having a productive season with the bat, and doing so by establishing that you are seeing pitches well. Jorge Mateo is clearly doing that, and sure, there might be some inflation, batting average on balls in play, that home run per fly ball rate, all these things are going to regress a bit. But like Jesse said, if he keeps up, half of this is a like top half of the league shortstop offensively. We know what he can do with the glove, and those two things coupled together turns him into like pretty elite company, top 10 shortstop in the league, no doubt about it.
I just want to say too that, right, like with the kind of player he is, he can't be striking out 27% of the time. I mean, he can, and maybe, but that demonstrates that there definitely needs to be a change in the approach, in my view, and he's done that, right? So, yeah.
And there's always a chance that, I don't know, we saw it with Chris Davis that he could get told by MLB he's not allowed to use ADHD or not allowed to use Adderall next year. And like, that's just to say plenty of things can happen, and you can lose the ability to see the ball well. You have natural fluctuations in it. So like, expect some regression from this point right here. But there's a lot of reason to have some faith that what he has done has put him in a much better place offensively than he was last year.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the one last thing I'll say about him is just that there's always been this talent inside of him. I mean, he was like one of the big guys that came to the the Athletics, I'm sorry, in the Sonny Gray trade with the Yankees. So like this has been a guy, he was a top 30 prospect many years ago, always been uber talented. And sometimes it's just guys are late bloomers, and he might be closer to for real, or these numbers might be closer to for real than we might have expected. Yeah, like Eli said, some regression will come, but yeah, I mean, he suddenly feels like the Orioles shortstop of the next couple of years when I wasn't coming into the season expecting that. So pretty exciting.
Absolutely.
I think what happened, he saw these two guys behind him at the Republic of
I was gonna make a joke
Israel
about this
baseball
game.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we said that on here, but Jesse and I ended up sitting behind him, and we spent like a good 10 minutes like hitting each other like, dude, is it him? Is it him? And I'm like, nah, it's not him. Jesse, I think it's him. And then yeah,
well, we didn't really go back and forth. We were just kind of like,
well, it was like silent, it was
yeah.
There was definitely an elbow, and
we were trying to confirm, but
when you did text me the back of his head, and
I
immediately was like, Mateo, and you're like, yeah. It's like,
yeah. It was pretty cool. He was very nice.
Well, that's good. He seems like a nice guy. I'll say most of the Orioles on this team seem nice, which not that I mean it matters, but you want to see him
matters
win
to me
first and foremost. Yeah. But I always remember my mom always liked Brooke Fordyce back in the day. Man, we've watched some bad Oriole teams, but my mom liked Brooke Fordyce, and then one of my friends or something, said they had asked him for like an autograph after a game, and he like completely blew him off and just wasn't nice to him, and that just made me like not like Brooke Fordyce anymore. And that's very
okay. I'm sorry, wasn't it Brooks?
No, Brooke Fordyce.
It was just Brooke?
Yeah,
Brooke
singular.
That's crazy.
He's just one Brooke. Yeah,
a babbling brook.
Yeah, he wasn't memorable enough, I guess, to remember how his name was spelled. But
yeah.
Anyway, hopefully we don't have any Brooke Fordyces. I don't know, on this team. But
yeah, I mean that stuff does matter to me, and it is important to me that there's nobody on the team I'm like hoping we trade at the deadline, because it's like I don't want this guy around, like
Right.
So yeah, I like that yeah,
absolutely.
and we have a very seemingly lovable team.
Oh God, something terrible will come out now, I'm sure. We've said that on record.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're starting off May this week. The Orioles have a different kind of schedule coming up. 3 games against the Royals, 3 against the Braves. That's kind of a different sort of one. We don't get to see that much, but I guess we do now. I think you play every team in the league now.
I'm excited to see Acuna play. He's tearing it up. He's tearing it up.
I think we're going to get Spencer Strider too, if I remember right.
Yikes. That's going to put to test my theory of not striking out, I guess.
Right.
It's also going to test our theory of how good are the Orioles. Are we just beating up on bad teams?
Well, yeah, because
this
gauntlet of at the Braves versus the Rays versus the Pirates, who are good, and then the Angels come to town, which is probably around the time we'll record our next episode. But Angels are not good, but they've got Ohtani, they've got Trout. They're always fun to watch.
So I also just realized, I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but we went 10-2, and the 2 losses were when Eduardo Rodriguez pitched against us. So we beat everybody except Eduardo Rodriguez.
Well, didn't they?
Because
they swept the Tigers the last time.
No,
the first time we swept the Tigers. Yeah, we ended up beating Eduardo.
Oh, you're right.
When he had the better game.
Oh, yeah. I'm misseeing this thing. Oh, I see the when he had the perfect game, we ended up coming back against the bullpen.
Right.
Oh, yes. Okay, got you.
Yeah, the other loss was against the Red Sox. I think.
Yes.
The 10-2.
Yeah, I'm looking.
The way you got this written, it is kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm looking on this outline, and I see Detroit and 2-1. So
who wrote the outline?
I did.
Yeah. The first thing these listeners need to know. The first thing these listeners need to know is that any assumption that this podcast is organized in any way ahead of time is an absolute farce.
Yeah. Didn't happen. The guy that wrote the outline can't read the outline.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. You're 100% right. I can't read the outline. I'll have to think about a new way to like format that part next time. Yeah. I mean, I know it's fine, but I can't even think of a different way to do it at the moment. I mean, I guess I could do bullet points underneath, but that seems a little extra. I don't know. So we'll figure it out.
All right. We'll let the listeners know what kind of dashes we decide on.
If the listeners have any suggestions, they can email us.
Yeah, please.
Right. Spend some time doing that.
Okay. Wait, I have to put Jesse on blast for this. So we all like rotate making the outlines. And there was a long period for the first couple years we were doing this show that Jesse would just go dash and then start typing and then go to the next line and do dash, start typing. And we were just saying, Jess, you just gotta hit that. You just gotta hit dash space so that it indents itself. It drove me. And I think this is probably because I'm his brother and, little things about us annoy each other. But it was just like, you just got to hit a space after it. And then next time you hit enter, you don't even have to type the dash. The dash will just be there for you. It'll already be nicely formatted, indented. It drove me absolutely nuts.
I will say I got I was fortunate this time making the outline because, as you guys can both probably tell, I copied and pasted the last outline and then just changed all the,
Don't you have a master's degree?
Yeah, I do.
We're gonna have to find
not in Microsoft Word though. Yeah. Not in Microsoft Word.
Well, this is Google Docs, so I don't know if that translates. But...
It's like I do have a master's degree, but if you ask me about chemistry, I'm gonna be very, very middle school with that.
Not quite the same thing.
Okay. Literally everybody uses.
I hear you.
It's okay.
That's true. Yeah.
All right.
Well, we got to wrap this up, but yeah, that's the schedule coming up. We'll be back in a couple weeks to record. Reminder to follow us on all the social media, Twitter in particular at The Warehouse Pod. Subscribe to the podcast, please, on various podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere else. And as Jesse said, if you've got opinions on the formatting of our outlines, please email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. But that's about it, guys. I think we're good, and hopefully the Orioles win another 10 out of 12 games. That'd be pretty cool.
I was going to say, look, I mean, if we come back and the Orioles sort of have this same record, maybe they overtake first place, maybe Joey Ortiz is back on the team. I mean, I could definitely see a podcast or two down the road, we're going to be turning this episode, a future episode, into just a giant party because the Orioles are doing so great. So
I thought you were going to say we should keep dogging on them. That as long as they're winning, just keep telling them they're bad.
No.
Okay.
No. So I do feel like I also want to say one thing. I think that I came off a little overly negative. I think that what I was trying to say is I think the current form of the Orioles and how we are playing right now is not 19-9 good.
Yeah.
But I think that the ceiling for this Orioles team is, like approaching levels that we haven't seen since the playoff run. I think the ceiling for this team is super, super high, especially, if Gunnar starts to impact the ball. Adley keeps doing what he's doing. Jorge Mateo stays where he is. Cedric Mullins has been tearing the cover off the ball. We didn't give him any credit in this episode. Yeah. But, then like if Mountie starts to find his footing again, Santander starts to make some adjustments, like this lineup turns into, a really, really good lineup. We could approach top 5 in the AL, I think. And then, like, we've talked about the rotation needs to take some steps forward, but we've seen flashes of absolute brilliance from Bradish, from Kramer. We know we have a solid thing in Kyle Gibson. Grayson Rodriguez, like, had a good last outing. Hopefully will continue to take steps forward. So I think that, like, the potential for this is so beautiful. And it's something that, we are eagerly following here at the Warehouse Pod.
Absolutely. Yeah, the best is yet to come.
Definitely.
For sure.
All right. Well, I think we'll end it on that note. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode, or this part of the month's episode of the Warehouse Podcast. Until next time, I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And as always, let's go O's.